not everybody is for physical variables in the environment having any effect. Grangust, I think that's how you pronounce it, group of researchers in Uppsala University near Sweden, near Stockholm in Sweden, they suggested that actually it was just suggestivity. There wasn't a huge amount of evidence there, and sort of methodological issues, as they didn't use a double-blind methodology. Wiseman, in the same study that I mentioned earlier, that was pro EM fields, actually suggested, well, yeah, there's a bit of suggestivity in there as well, so who knows. Chris French famously did Project Hornet in 2009. He said, no evidence at all, it's all suggestivity, although there has been, see Steve tutting in the corner there has been concerns about the methodology used actually with that, and Chris, for all his best intentions, he's not really trained in that sort of measurement of physical variables, so I'll leave that one there. So, well, who knows is the answer to that really. We need more research and we need to do it better, and that's why we're all here today in various guises. So, again, I apologise in advance, this might come across a little bit preachy. As Anne alluded to earlier, massive subjects, EVP, and I'm going to focus on a generic methodology and focus on two variables, particularly or commonly measured in investigations, and that's electromagnetic fields and temperature. But I will allude to a few other bits and pieces as well. And a bit of physics involved perhaps, but I'm just scratching the surface really. Okay, and hopefully, if it does get a bit technical, you don't glaze over, but it will hopefully stimulate further down the line a bit of thought about it. And obviously feel free to get in touch at any time for a bit more meat on the bones. So yeah, important standards, methodology as I've alluded to. If we're going to have research that stands up to peer review, most of us are members of the SPR, you get the journal of the SPR, peer review papers. Any scientific paper, it builds on previous research. Okay, you need it. If you don't write the paper properly, it won't get published. And that's the sort of the what's in it for me side of that is, well, I want objective data to build my research on. Again, as I think Alan alluded to in this talk at the beginning, academia won't help us in this respect. You can't go to university and do a degree in ghost hunting. No one would teach you how to go out and use devices. So it's really up to us. So it's up to the ghost hunters to sort of work it out for ourselves, really. And as I'll allude to later, a lot of misunderstanding remains about use of, I wouldn't say equipment, but actually methodology using the equipment. It's interesting at the beginning where Alan again referred to scientific ghost hunting, and there's a bit of an assumption by many that science means gadgets, basically. Anything you can put batteries in with flashing lights, it must mean that you're being scientific. It's not really true. You can be very unscientific with as many gadgets in the world. It's more about the methodology. So, skeptic with a K. And again, it's interesting, Alan made the point about Podmore, either a believer or a skeptic, but I don't really like those titles, because there's an implication that you're either one side of the fence or the other. And if you're a believer, you believe in all sorts of things, life after death, everything. Whereas if you're a skeptic, you're a member of that elite group that meets in pubs every few months around the country and moaning about how rubbish ghost hunters are. So I've been to one of these, and they're very interesting actually. Skeptics in the pub, I think they're called. But if you're a believer, I'd say I'm a believer. I don't believe particularly that there's an afterlife. I'm not saying I do or I don't. I believe that people are having experiences, okay, and that's enough for me. If people are reporting experiences, then in my eyes, ghosts do exist, and I mean that as a cultural phenomenon. If people are having experiences, apparition experiences, poltergeist phenomena, as Alan alludes to, again, there's more evidence that suggests it does than it doesn't. But that's not to say what it is. Academia, of course, will say, well, there's no point doing this because whatever data you get, it doesn't mean anything because you can't control the environment. We are field researchers. We can't do this in the lab. There is parapsychology, there's the Ganzfeld experiments, telepathy, all that kind of stuff in the universities. We can't control the environment, but what we can do is do our best to have a robust methodology which we can control the techniques, and that's what we're going to talk about. So that's why we measure. There's lots of good reasons to measure, but what do we measure? A lot, basically. There's a lot to measure. I think the jury's still out on most of that. Ionisation, for example, and as I say, lots of you can have a whole day on this if you're going to go into these subjects individually, but obviously I don't have the time today. So, temperature I'll look at later on, and the good old electromagnetism as well, humidity as well I mentioned. Big first mistake by many is they measure everything. They'll turn up at the location, so whether it's a well-known or a public or a private, and I'll get the kit out and they're sort of measuring everything because they can. Point of that is you just get loads of data, you can't analyse it, and you end up being a sort of a jack of all trades, master of none. You get lots and lots of data, but nothing's really done properly. Let the reports guide you. As in my role in the Guys Club, I analyse reports and often see things where there's been a witness report of cold spots or temperature anomalies, and the actual investigation is actually focused on EMF sweeps, whatever that means. So be guided by the reports. If there's a report of temperature anomalies, don't waste your time taking EMF readings and ionisation of this and locking out cameras in lots of rooms with no activity. Focus on where there has been activity. It does of course need knowledge of what you're measuring. Okay, we'll come to that in a moment. So as I say, avoid being a jack of all trades, master of none. Baseline measurements. This is documenting now, so this is starting the investigation. Baseline's great. You see this on Most Haunted on the TV shows. They'd run around the outside for 30 minutes with an EMF meter and a thermometer. That's it, baseline. Brilliant. Well, not really, because a baseline needs to be taken over a number of hours. I'd say days, really. Prior visits, for example. If a witness has reported something in the middle of the day, why are you taking baselines at night? We'll look at electromagnetism later. People turn off all the sockets in the house, want to get a good read. Well, why? If the witness has reported phenomena under those conditions, why are you changing the conditions for your baseline? A bit silly, really. And a lot of this, actually, just breaking off it, is common sense. So there's no panacea here. I don't think I'm going to say anything that most of you don't already know, but a lot of it is actually common sense. The easy one's accurate time, and that sounds obvious, but even to the second, okay. So if you make a measurement manually, we'll cover automating it later on. But actually, if you're going to make a measurement, or you hear something, or you see something, write it down at the time. I mean by the second, because a few seconds can make a big difference. If somebody coughs in another part of the building, and they write down they coughed. Someone else hears a cough at that time, and they write down the second. You can tell. If there's it was about 12:15 I heard a cough, and it was about 17 minutes past when I heard a cough. Is it the same cough? Don't know. Hacking, the military sometimes call it. Be specific. So if you're making measurements, don't say, I left a thermometer in the room over there, in that building. It was around about midday to 2:30ish. Be specific in what you'll say, where the location is. What device have you used? Units, clear language units. I'll cover units later, but basically stick to the same units. So the fun bit now, use the equipment. Okay, that's what we're all here for. This is the gadgetry side of it. None of this, I'm afraid. I think you all know what that is. Most did everyone know what that is? But, that's it. Yeah. I don't think this exists actually. I'll be honest. Right. So first of all, four golden rules. Okay. So we're going to start with some generic golden rules. And again, all comes across as common sense. Use the correct equipment. Okay, it sounds obvious, but you'll see a lot of equipment often gets used for measuring stuff it's not really meant to measure. Publish specifications. In a moment I'll cover paranormal equipment, and this is the equipment that allegedly is designed for paranormal investigations, of which, to my knowledge, there isn't any. Although the manufacturers and the sellers would actually lead you to believe that. You need the specs, so you can work out the accuracy. If you don't know how accurate your measuring device is, how do you know how accurate your measurement is? How do you know how accurate your objective measurement is? Use it properly. Okay. Read the manual. Nowadays, manuals can be downloaded. They either come with the device or they can download them. Keep on your phone. You can download the whole. Personally, I've got all mine on a sort of PDF file on my phone and iPad. So. It's like a camera. Most times the auto settings are perfect, but often you need to adjust the settings. That's particularly relevant for temperature measurement later on. keep the units consistent. Okay, so it's pretty obvious: centigrade, Fahrenheit, temperature. And as a sort of an odd analogy, you might find, my wife had her first baby about 3 months ago, and during the pregnancy, they'd taken measurements of her tummy, and they were putting her right above this average growth curve, and said, "Oh yeah, the baby's getting a bit big, but go for these tests, go for these tests." So, oh, okay, oh, it's all fine, but it's within the range, but it's a bit big, Went for a scan a week before she arrived, and now she's below the curve. I said, "Oh no, she stopped growing. More tests." Turns out all was fine. It's because they were using different measurements. And even the consultant said, "Oh, these measurements don't mean anything." So we were thinking, well, why are you putting us through these then? They're using tape measures on one hand and scans on the other, so you can't compare them. You compare apples and pears. So the medical profession is guilty of that as well. So paranormal equipment, as I said, there are some devices. I won't mention them by name, not for legal reasons, but there are some pictures coming up later on. A lot of these devices you'll see on eBay, you'll see on the ghosthunting.com shop or something. They measure lots of variables at once, but not very well. They're often modified, okay, from the original specs, so they're basically cheap rubbish equipment, effectively, that's been modified beyond its initial, or the purpose it was actually designed for. As such, no specs, no data really. In fact, if you do dig down and actually find the specs, you'll find they're horrendously inaccurate. I've seen some magnetic field devices at plus or minus 40% accuracy, and thermometers plus or minus 3 degrees or something. So they can be inaccurate. And ironically, you actually find that this equipment costs more than basic equipment made by manufacturers that know what they're doing. So I'd say stick to buying your thermometers from a company that makes thermometers. You get them cheaper and better quality, ironically. So calibrating then, unrealistic for most of us. So this is the ISO, they're the gold standard of calibrating. You can't send your equipment off every year and have it calibrated. It's expensive, it's time consuming, and to be honest, it won't really achieve that much for what we're trying to achieve on the normal field investigation. But we can still make measurements, okay? So this might come across a little bit, oh well, why are we bothering this? This sounds quite hard. I've got to get all this kit and make sure it's accurate and calibrate it, and I can't do all that, so why should we bother? Well, you actually can. You actually can achieve a decent level of accuracy and calibration using pretty basic techniques and get a half-decent set of data. So with that, some tips for that. Try and stick to the same manufacturer. It's very common in a group, so everyone's got their own bits of kit. Ideally you have a club equipment, somebody maybe specialises in that area, cameras, audio visual, whatever. Not always practical, but what you can do is compare devices. Okay, so if you've got a different range of thermometers, I'll cover thermometers later on with an example. You can compare them in the various conditions, see how they all react, and then refer all the later measurements to a single device. And you should get a pretty good set of measurements. But of course, as I said with documenting, be specific which device you use, because you're all going to be writing down your measurements, hopefully. If you make sure you write down what device you're using, you can then obviously relate it to the master device and get an objective set of data. So all that's up to now is pretty common sense, really. There's nothing too physicsy at this point. But that's going to change now. Electromagnetic fields. EMF doesn't stand for that, by the way. It's electromotive force, but we've kind of inherited that name in the ghost hunting world, EMF. So I will use it as electromagnetic fields. I'll start from the outset. I'm not saying this is something that should or shouldn't be measured, but I know people do. And the research has suggested there is probably something in it, perhaps, but not for the reasons many think. They're not ghost detectors. These are quotes from a rather well-reputed paranormal website that teaches technique. Lovely website, very well designed, very authoritative, it's up to date. It wasn't written 10 years ago. He's updating it all the time. For a long time, ghost hunters relied on EMF to determine the presence of ghosts. There we go. These are vital tools for determining the presence of paranormal activity, spirits, ghosts, and more. Okay, so apparently these things do exist, ghost detectors. And remember, the use of an EMF meter or detectors is a tool that many believe will help in determining the presence of paranormal activity. these sort of things are a bit like subliminal messaging. They'll do mixed messages. So lots of statements that this is what will happen. Oh, but by the way, it's not proven. So that's kind of the get out of jail free card. So they get a bit of credibility. But then there's so much words to the effect that, yeah, these things are like ghost detectors, that you'll go away and buy one. So they're not ghost detectors. Bit of physics now, sorry. Units, Teslas and milli-guys people tend to use. Gauss and Tesla, both eminent scientists in their own fields, electromagnetic fields, named after that. Tesla is the more modern unit, but people tend to use milli-guys still. But whatever you use, be consistent. Like I say, keep the units the same. There is quite a big order of magnitude between the Gauss and the Tesla. Most devices you see in the field are Gauss meters, and they measure magnetic fields. Okay, not saying there's nothing in electric fields. Some devices do measure electric fields, but most of the research over the years has been on magnetic fields. Okay, so be aware of what you're measuring. And this is one area where calibration is quite important for two reasons. This is a two-pronged approach to electromagnetic field measurements. There's how the meter is designed to work, and also how accurate it is. And because of the complexity of this subject, and I'm only scratching the surface really, making a few generalisations, it's important if you're going to use multi-devices to measure stuff, you compare the different devices that you've got and use them properly. For example, we live in a 3D world, okay? Most of the cheaper meters that you buy, or most of the Ghosthunting meters that you see on these websites, they're all single axis. So you need to do sort of 3 measurements at right angles and do some maths, 3-dimensional Pythagoras, from school. The other side of calibration is 50 or 60 hertz. So these devices are not meant for us, they never were. They were meant for measuring the biological effects of radiation on the body. Okay, so they're designed to read power line frequency, which in the UK is 50, in the US it's 60. So to start, it's important that you actually know what your meter's made for. Most devices you can actually choose 50 or 60. And related to that is frequency weighting. But as I say, they're designed to assess the radiation effect on the body. Many companies actually will offer their services to come around your house with these devices and do a sweep of your house and work out how susceptible you are, and should you move house or should you sort of sue a new electricity company, etc., etc. Which, bizarrely, I'm actually surprised that many ghost hunters don't actually look at that as a line of work, because it's probably the most useful use for some of their devices, and it also helps pay for better devices going forward. Again, I don't want to get too bogged down in this, guys, but frequency weighting, and this is really important if you're going to take measurements. If you've got a device that's got a standard weighted meter response, and again, without the specs, you wouldn't know if it is or not. So back to what I said earlier, get a device that's got specs. A 10 milligauss field, I use the old measurement name milligauss, or the unit milligauss, at 50 hertz reads 10. But let's say there was a 400 hertz frequency around for whatever reason, it'll actually read 80 when the field strength's 10. So this is basically measuring what we call flux density. Again, I won't get too physicsy, but it's looked at the energy response on the body. A flat weighted model will read 10 at all frequencies. Okay, so they're more accurate in some respects, perhaps not meant for on a biological sense, but there are some manufacturers that do make these. Read the manual. That's all I'll say about that. So know what you're measuring, and so you can compare measurements accordingly. So is frequency important? Well, yes, it is actually. As we see there, it can affect the measurements. Even this device here reads 10 milligauss. Great, but you don't know what you're measuring. You're assuming it's 50 hertz. Who knows? And let's not forget Persinger, his original research was down at between 1 and 10 hertz, weakly fluctuating magnetic fields. Richard Wiseman and Jason Braithwaite to some extent, they looked at the variance of the fields that was changing frequencies. Persinger's research and Steve's research back in Cheshire suggested that power line frequencies are part of the equation, but we need to know what the frequency is really. And even those that are calibrated to 50, 60 hertz, they will pick up other frequencies. I've got two different devices that one was reading 0 in the location, one was reading all sorts of funny measurements. Both really high quality devices, flat weighted. Reckon they were sensitive between 0 and 2000 hertz, but one was recording something and one wasn't. So clearly something's being picked up. Long wave radio is the classic one. Mobile phones as well. Probably the old TV ghost hunting trick. When people start talking to ghosts with their EMF meters and a quick blip of the mobile phone and the lights go on. I'm not saying that for a minute, apparently. Allegedly. And harmonics. Multiples of the figures of the frequency that you're measuring. So often like a 50 hertz supply, power supply, will get re-radiated by moving machinery. Won't get too bogged down with that. So yeah, we need to send the frequency. Unfortunately, most EMF meters, Gauss meters, do not give that information. So you're looking at what we call a spectrum analyzer. Now, that's the most common one, handheld. They're not cheap, and that's the downside. As I'll cover later, if you often add up all the devices that a ghost hunter will have in their kit bag, if you combine the cost, you're not far off actually for getting one of these. Especially on eBay, you get some good deals on eBay. They give you the frequency, you can data log, so you can set it up and leave it, and it records measurements. You can go back, download it, analyse it later, and you can connect to a PC for more analysis. This is just an example of it in use, probably not the best photo, but got a field here. You've got 50.2 there, 5, that's on milligauss, and this is plugged into the computer at the same time, telling us you've got 50 there, 50 hertz is the main frequency, and there's the measurement. So useful. This will give frequency information, okay? And they're expensive, I'll be honest, but you can get some good deals on eBay. I saw one actually a couple of months ago. The model that I've got was being sold for about £300, which is cheaper than the cost of probably 3 or 4 of the low quality paranormal meters that you can get on the market. So they're not ghost detectors, but as we said, they're worthy of further study. Know how it works. Obviously, because you haven't got a spectrum analyzer, don't necessarily go, I'm not measuring EMF, pointless. I wouldn't say that. It's a good litmus test. It actually will promote maybe all further research is required here. And one high quality device, as we'll see. So these are some examples of the paranormal devices. Versus that. In fact, the cost of these together is about £600. That thing actually doesn't measure EMF, it produces it apparently. REM pod, DAS pod, apparently, I don't know what it is, but it's about £300 alone, that thing is. It's very expensive. Cool, so on to temperature humidity. Personally, this is where my sort of interest is really. It's useful, mainly neglected quite a lot. It's most commonly reported. People don't say, "Oh, I felt a high EMF in this location." They can't do that. People feel cold spots though. They feel things. Humidity, changes in humidity can actually make you think you're feeling colder or hotter. We've got a case study at the end, actually, very briefly from the Ghost Hunting investigation a few years back, where we had a humidity issue, which caused some interesting atmospheric effects. Unlike electromagnetism, the theory is quite straightforward. Okay, and more importantly for us, you can do accurate measurements simply and quite cheaply as well. You can get some really good quality equipment for a very low price compared to the electromagnetic measurement devices. So basic stuff: temperature thermometers, obviously humidity, hygrometers. Relative humidity, in fact, is the parameter, and that's basically a percentage of the humidity in the air. So 100% humidity would be that you wouldn't see me here, it'd be foggy, and as the temperature drops, the air can hold less moisture. So what we're measuring here is how moist the air is. So on a cold, foggy day, you'd have a high humidity. On a sort of very dry day, low humidity, obviously. Contact and non-contact thermometers. So contact measures the air temperature or the medium that you're measuring. I use one for measuring my fish tank water. In fact, that's a contact thermometer. Non-contact doesn't measure temperature as such; it measures radiation. They're effectively cameras, which measure, I'll cover that in a minute, electromagnetic radiation, the infrared spectrum, convert it into temperature. So it gets a little bit physicsy again, guys, here, sorry, but hopefully it will give a basic grounding of what to look for when you're buying a thermometer, okay, in the specifications. You've got thermocouples, resistance thermometers, and infrared. And infrared, of course, includes the good old thermal imaging camera, the other ghost detector that you might have seen on the paranormal TV shows. So a bit of technical stuff going forward, but emphasis will be on using them in the field. So thermocouples. Personally, my favourite type of thermometer. Very straightforward. Two bits of different metal wire. They touch, and if there's a temperature difference over the junction, causes a little current which gets measured on the device. Very straightforward, very simple. Like I say, that's calibrated into a temperature. Another advantage of this is that it comes in two parts. You get the thermometer, you get the device, which is often quite small, with a probe. So if you damage the probe, or you lose the probe, you just get a new one. And the probes are actually very, very cheap. You can get some probes for a couple of pounds, which are actually very good quality as well. Different types. Those of you that want to go out and buy a thermocouple in your lunch hour today, you'll see both letters, JKTE. They're all based on industrial use, really, depending on your temperature range and what you're measuring. Most common for us is type K. The reason being quite high accuracy over a pretty good temperature range. Most of the temperatures we'll be measuring, so between maybe just below 0 up to 20 or 30 degrees. Some of these are very good at thousands of degrees, which obviously not really relevant in the sun. Good. So the choice of probe though, so it doesn't stop there. This is one of my fish tank actually. It's just a bit of metal. Very good, but not great for measuring air temperature. The favourite one, and these are great. They're really sensitive. They work really quickly. It's called exposed wire thermocouple there, and that's basically it's two exposed wires. That's why it's called that. And this bit obviously plugs into your device. These are great because they work really quickly. You can hold this and you can go put it in your mouth, and within that time you'll see the temperature go up and down. It's that quick. They're fantastic for measuring very quick transient temperature changes, but they can be damaged quite easily if you're not careful. The compromise, it's called a rapid response probe. Okay, so these are effectively this with a metal tube around it with holes at the bottom. So they're still pretty sensitive and they're more robust. You won't damage them, but you sacrifice sensitivity, so not great. Personally, unless you in the kind of airflow that we're looking at in investigations, and if you're careful, exposed wire is absolutely fine. So I'd recommend getting them. This one actually made by a company called ETI, a UK company. They make all sorts of thermometer probes. These are about £7 each, I think. But very, very good. Accuracy of half a degree. So very, very good. Okay, this one's slightly more complicated, so I'm going to gloss over this a little bit. But basically, these are a resistance probe. They're the sort of thermometers you buy off the shelf. If you buy a thermometer that looks like that and you put it on your wall to measure the temperature, it's probably a resistance thermometer. And that basically means, the theory behind it is that the resistance of a substance changes with temperature. In the specs of your device, it'll tell you if it's an RTD, a resistance temperature detector or thermistor. Doesn't matter really, they're both part of the same family. So to do with the materials, if it's ceramic or metal, how it responds to temperature. So is it a linear response? If the resistance doubles, does the temperature double, etc., etc. Very general, and there's some engineers here probably shaking your head at me now. But very basically, for our work, I'd say thermistors probably give you the best option. They're cheaper and they're more accurate. Still not as sensitive though as the thermocouples. Okay, so that's worth bearing in mind. So I'll cover in a bit. So on to humidity then. That's the next bit of temperature, humidity. Thermocouples don't really care how wet the air is, so we need a resistance type detector to measure humidity. I mentioned that they're not as fast reacting. You can get some from industry, but there's not a huge demand in the real world. So even in industry, there's not really demand at all for fast reacting humidity sensors. So hygrometers are slower to react. I mentioned humidity earlier. So if you're going to measure humidity, you won't measure rapid changes. They just don't exist. This is very physicsy, very technical. Again, the high-end devices. When I say high-end, I'm not saying hundreds of pounds. I've got a thermometer that's about £50, which has this rating in the specs. It's called tau, it's the Greek T. It gives you a tau rating. So in this example, tau 63.8 seconds means it takes 8 seconds to measure 63% of the change. I've got another device that says tau 90.5, so 90% of the measurement. And often you'll get one setting for temperature, one setting for humidity. A hygrometer will measure relative humidity, of course. That's why there's a temperature measurement and a humidity measurement as well. So I mentioned they're slower, but not really a problem, to be honest. Because like I said, the point of this is to use the right equipment properly. So you can measure these for your baseline measurements. Okay, so if you turn up at a location 24 hours in advance, set these around the location. Data logging, I'll cover that in a minute, and then you can leave them alone. So they're really good for giving you a long-term, steady state measurement of sort of ambient temperature and humidity. Cool. Right. So going forward, this is slightly more mainstream, I think, so from the TV shows. Infrared. So this is the infrared thermometers. These are the guns you might see, guys pointing around investigations. Thermal cameras as well. We've come down in price over the years. In fact, you can plug a little gadget into your phone now, which allows you to use your phone as a thermal imaging camera. The theory being that all objects emit black body radiation, so we all give this out. And it's in the infrared part of the spectrum, so that's above about 700 nanometers if you're interested. So 4 to 700 is visible spectrum, and below 400 is your ultraviolet. Importantly for us, the wavelength is directly proportional to the temperature. So the hotter an object is, the wavelength reflects that, and you can calibrate it either as a number on your device or indeed a picture on a thermal camera. But unlike other thermometers, you need a bit of care. Okay, so you can't just fire up and go. You need to actually look at some settings first. So again, I'll try and keep it simple as I can. Emissivity, even the most basic IR thermometers will have an emissivity setting. Normally defaulted to 0.95 because that's a good average. But polished surfaces, 0.14, max 0.93. This is effectively how much energy is being reflected or emitted. So if I had a thermal camera now and I aimed at that window, I'd see myself in the display. So that's my energy being reflected back, because that's a polished surface. And on that note, reflected apparent temperature. This is something unique to thermal cameras. Again, don't get too bogged down in this. However, if you're going to do thermal imaging correctly, you need to take this into account. And that's basically how much of your temperature on your display is from the object being measured, or indeed reflected by other objects around it. Most of the user guides for these cameras, I know certainly FLIR, the main manufacturer, do, and they give you a very basic method of measuring this. I'd say that's not too important for our use, but if you're really serious, definitely worth doing. But certainly that emissivity is worth thinking about. So, common mistakes then. I'm sure most of you are aware of this, but I've covered it anyway. This is on that same website actually. So this is where they're pushing a device. Check price. I've blacked it out for legal reasons. It's the best on the market, this one, for ghost hunting. Mainly because remember that when a spirit appears, it pulls what heats available from the air around it. There we go. And that means if it's already cold outside, you can easily see cold spots in the negative temperatures. There you go. So you can actually chase the cold spot around the room. There you go. They don't measure our temperature, you're just measuring the wall or whatever surface that you're pointing at. Hopefully that's common knowledge to most of you in here. There are some thermal cameras actually that can measure gases and air temperature, mainly gases and fats, but these are megabucks, so really outside the scope for most of us, if not all of us. The other one then is this into-spot ratio. Okay, so this is probably the more common of those two mistakes. The bigger this number, the better. Okay, so this says 8 to 1. That says if I'm 8 metres away from the wall, the bit I'm measuring is a metre in diameter. Okay, I've seen this myself on the investigation from a chat about a decade now. This chap, fresh from his investigator's course with another organisation, thought, oh look, there's a cold spot there. It's 90 in there, and it's 24 there. Because his laser pointer was going from, you know, three or 4 feet left and right. But of course, it was such a big area. What was the elephant in the room was the person in the room. That was literally next to what he was measuring. So he was picking up their body temperature. So it sounds stupid, but people do make these mistakes. The less quality meter devices have lower numbers. So for example, 3 to 1 means at 3 metres it's a metre on the wall. 10 metres is 3.5 metres. So I'm not saying that's a bad thing. You might want to get an overview, but be aware of it. Some of the best ones you can be up to 50 to 1. Fantastic, really localised temperature measurement. The laser beam, of course, it's not measuring the temperature, it's just a guide. Okay. The temperature is being measured by the radiation that's been funneled into the little lens here, onto a sensor which calibrates it into a temperature. So techniques then, generally, I've got 5 minutes. Data logging is brilliant because you can fire and forget, leave it alone. Steve will cover this probably later, more generic investigative techniques. But by leaving stuff alone, it gives you more capacity to investigate. In my day job, I'm not an academic at all. I process lots of information at the same time, and we talk about the gorilla in the room. It's based on a psychological experiment in the video we actually saw, where we asked to count a load of basketball players. You might have seen this, bouncing the ball, and the gorilla walks across the room. No one sees it until they play it back, and you see the gorilla. So we actually refer to this. Did you see the gorilla in the room? If you're busy sort of making notes and looking at devices, you're going to miss a lot of the investigation. So data logging is fantastic, and of course you can analyse it subsequently. Calibration techniques, as I mentioned, different types of manufacturers. I said basically compare them, put them all together in a place, look at the measurements with the device and the probe, and then you can put them all together and relate them to a master device. With a thermometer that's 0.5 accuracy probe and 2 degrees an actual device, the same temperature can either be plus 2.5 or minus 2.5. So you could have 2 temperature measurements, one says 18, one says 23. Now I don't know, 5 degrees is quite a big job, I think. I could fill 2 degrees in my living room. Soon my wife can anyway. So calibrating, put them all together, take the readings, repeat, and then you've got a standardised set of data there. Obviously not in the story, air's not static, it moves. Hot air rises, drafts. Hot air or hot wire anemometer, you might have heard of those. Anemometers, they measure air flow. You might see these propellers on the side of roads and motorways. Great for high currents, not great for us. These devices are basically it's a wire that's heated up, and the cooling effect of drafts tells you what the airflow is. The resistance of the wire changes and it calibrates it. So again, get it on eBay for about £100, maybe £50 I saw one the other week actually. Temperature there is different to there, so you haven't got 1,000 thermometers, so think about where you're putting your thermometers and your devices, and obviously be accurate with the recording of your measurements. Like I say, data logging is great because it automates the whole process. Just set it up and go, and then download it later on. So, key point then, use the device properly for what you're trying to carry out. IR device is great for a quick survey, surface cold spots, sources of drafts, for example. But combinations actually works very well. Here's a little tongue-in-cheek example actually. So report a ghost or temperature anomalous in this bit of the building. So you set up your data loggers. These are called LASCAR. They measure temperature and humidity using a resistance method. And I've set up my rapid reaction thermocouples here, and then lo and behold, Ghost comes wandering along, look, and cold spots. Okay, these react really quickly. So a bit tongue-in-cheek there, but hopefully it illustrates the point I'm trying to make. Cool. So in summary, think about what you're measuring and why. Make sure that you're using the right devices properly. Accuracy, the sensor you're using. IR devices very easily misused, so don't do that. Calibration, like I say, impractical to go to ISO standards, but ultimately put them all together, take measurements, compare them, how they all react. And air, of course, is not static. Good. So quick case study then. Put it into practice. This is a ghost pub investigation that I did a few years ago. South London pub. Usual things: voices, object movement, temperature drops, etc. And notably, a feeling of a presence in the cellar. So that's quite interesting. So we cellar's two main rooms. We set up loads of data logging equipment, temperature, humidity logging. The rest of the investigation wasn't that much happening really. It was a couple of visits and nothing really happened. However, let's look at some science first, or rather psychology and physiology. That's one of the eye for the psychologist there. Apparent temperature. When you're hot, humidity makes you feel hotter. When you're cold, it can make you feel colder. Okay, bit of suggestivity there, but this is the data that we've got. So this is the temperature. Red. It's about half a degree, so it's pretty constant. That's called the dew point. That's a temperature. That's the temperature which the air condenses into fog. And the reason that changed is because the air got wetter every few minutes. That's humidity. And this slide actually shows you it's changing about 15% every 15 minutes or so. So periodic fluctuation in humidity, subsequently traced back to an air conditioning machine actually. So I did a follow-up with them a few months later, and our report, nothing ostensibly paranormal. I think as Cornell Allen was saying earlier, said I'll never say to anyone your house isn't haunted. It might be, I don't know. we'll never know. But there's nothing on our investigation that was ostensibly paranormal. The air conditioning unit was serviced, and there were no further reports. Funny old thing. And they were honest about it. They weren't making money out of this. They weren't trying to sell ghost hunting tour. They were just a pub that got in contact with us. So, could the fluctuating humidity, along with suggestion, have led to the feeling of the presence? Could that extend to the rest of the building? Possibly. Or when I went round actually to the pub in the follow-up visit, and I spoke to one of the barmaids there. She said, well, maybe the ghost is interfering with the air conditioning machine. Possibly, yeah, who knows. But importantly, we've got an objective set of data, and I think quite an interesting example of how if you use the kit properly, you can get some decent results there. I won't say debunking, I don't like that word, but you've got an objective set of data. It doesn't make you a skeptic. You've analysed the situation properly, and you've got a good set of results. So, almost pub time, guys. Summary: don't measure everything. Know what you're measuring and why. Be guided by the witness reports. So, Alan mentioned that earlier. It all starts with witness reports. If it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be here now, really. If we didn't have the experiences, there'd be no point to all this. So, focus your investigation on that area. Don't measure everything. You can't do it. You can't do it well. Understand what you're measuring. So a little bit of technical data there, you probably might forget half of that, but hopefully it stimulated a little bit of thought, which if you're going to go out and buy a device or a gadget, you know what to look for and the traps in using it. And understanding, of course, that what can affect the measurement that you're trying to do. Use the right equipment correctly. I'm not saying don't go out and buy paranormal equipment like the K2. But they're much better devices for similar cost, in my opinion. Keep obviously wear a good watch, and be specific when you're making your measurements. And like I say, data logging is great because it automates measurements. So, Thank you. It's lunchtime, I believe now. That's my email address, the Ghost Club, and I think we don't have anything in the Spontaneous Case Committee, but that's from the website. You can get in touch with the Spontaneous Case Committee. And guys, like information there, a bit of a quick fire subjects, but if you've got any feedback or comments or questions, please get in touch.